The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Ries and Jack Trout. Quick question. Who was the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean? Come on, you know this one. Charles Lindbergh, right? Of course you do. His name is basically carved into our collective memory. Now here's where it gets interesting. Who was the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic? Crickets, right? His name was Bert Hinkler. And here's the kicker. Bert was probably a better pilot than Lindbergh. He flew faster, used less fuel, and by every technical measure, pulled off a more impressive feat. Yet one guy became a household name, and the other became the answer to a trivia question nobody asks. So what happened? The answer unlocks something fascinating about how our world actually works. This isn't just about aviation history. It's about business, success, and honestly, it's about understanding why some things catch fire while others fizzle out. It's our first glimpse into the powerful, invisible forces that shape everything around us. Forces that two marketing legends, Ries and Jack Trout, spent their careers decoding. In 1993, they dropped a deceptively simple book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. This wasn't your typical business book filled with fluffy motivational speak. This was a rule book. Think of it like discovering the laws of physics, but for the marketplace. Ries and Trout argued that companies had been burning through billions of dollars on brilliant creative campaigns that were doomed from day one. Why? Because they were unknowingly breaking these fundamental laws. Today, we're cracking open that rule book. We're going to explore the hidden architecture of how ideas spread and why some stick while others disappear. By the time we're done, you won't just understand why Lindbergh became famous while Hinkler faded into obscurity. You'll have a completely new lens for seeing the world. One that explains why certain ideas explode and change everything, while others, sometimes even better ideas, just quietly fade away. This is the secret playbook for making a real impact, and it all starts with one truth that completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. Here's where most people get it wrong. Most companies operate under a dangerous assumption. They think marketing is basically about convincing people you've got a better product or service. So they pour everything into research, development, making the best thing. They line up all their facts, convinced that quality and truth will win the day. But Ries and Trout are here to tell us that's an illusion, and it's the single biggest mistake that leads to failure. Because marketing isn't a battle of products. It's a battle of perceptions. Let that marinate for a second. It's not about what's objectively true. It's about what people believe is true. The only reality in marketing is what exists in your customers' minds. Everything else is just background noise. This is the foundation everything else builds on. It's why the logical, obvious way to market something is almost always dead wrong. You're not fighting a product battle in the real world. You're fighting a perception battle inside a crowded, easily distracted, and incredibly stubborn human mind. Which brings us back to Charles Lindbergh and Bert Hinkler. The first law, the law of leadership, is beautifully simple. It's better to be first than it is to be better. It's way easier to get into someone's mind first than to convince them later that you've got something better than what's already there. The leading brand in any category is almost always the first brand that claimed that mental real estate. Think about it. Hertz in rental cars, IBM in computers, Coca-Cola in cola, Gillette in razors. Are they all objectively the best? Does it even matter at this point? They were first, and they planted their flag in our minds. This is why when a new category emerges, the first brand often becomes the name we use for the whole thing. We don't ask for a facial tissue, we ask for a Kleenex. We don't ask for a bandage, we ask for a Band-Aid. You'll literally stand in front of a Canon copier and say, "How do I make a Xerox?" The first brand to own the idea owns it, period. But hold on, what if you can't be first? Is it game over? Are you destined to be Bert Hinkler forever? Not at all. This is where the second law swoops in to save the day. The law of the category. If you can't be first in a category, create a new category you can be first in. Remember Bert Hinkler, our forgotten second Atlantic flyer? Well, what about the third person to fly solo across the Atlantic? You probably know her name, Amelia Earhart. But is she remembered as the third person to fly the Atlantic? Nope. She's remembered as the first woman to do it. She created a new category. When IBM dominated computers, all their competitors, nicknamed the Seven Dwarves, tried to build better mainframes. They all failed. Then Digital Equipment Corporation came along. They didn't try to build a better mainframe. They invented something new, the mini-computer. They were first in that category. And they became huge. Later, others followed. Sun Microsystems created the first workstation. Tandem made the first fault-tolerant computer. Dell became the first personal computer sold over the phone. When you're launching something new, the first question shouldn't be how is this better than the competition? The question should be first what? In what category is this thing the absolute first? Because people are skeptical when brands claim to be better. Everyone says they're better. But people get curious about new categories. Few people care about what's better, but everyone's interested in what's new. These two laws, leadership and category, are powerful, but they point to something even deeper, the law of the mind. It's better to be first in the mind than to be first in the marketplace. Being first in the marketplace only matters because it gives you a head start on getting into people's minds. Sometimes the first product actually fails. There was a personal computer before the Apple II. It was called the MITS Altair 8800. Ever heard of it? Probably not. It was first to market, but Apple, with its clean name and clear message, was first to capture meaningful mental real estate. The mind is the true battlefield. And it's a battlefield with some pretty weird rules. The most important rule? You cannot change a mind once it's made up. Trying to do so is possibly the biggest waste of time and money in marketing. Xerox dominated copiers, a brilliant, powerful company. Then, they decided to get into computers. They spent billions of dollars and decades trying to change the public's mind. But in our minds, Xerox means copier. It never worked. Wang owned word processors. But when personal computers took over, Wang couldn't make the leap. In our minds, Wang meant word processor. The mind doesn't work like a computer where you can just overwrite old data. It works more like a filing cabinet. Once something's filed under a certain label, it's nearly impossible to change that label. This is why you need to blast your way into the mind, not gently ease your way in. First impressions are everything. So how do you actually do that? How do you claim that precious mental real estate? This takes us to one of the most powerful laws in the whole book, the law of focus. The most powerful concept in marketing is owning a word in the prospect's mind. Not some complicated jargon, not a made-up word, a simple word, straight from the dictionary. Federal Express became a giant because it owned one word, overnight. For years, if you absolutely positively needed something there overnight, you didn't just send a package, you FedExed it. They sacrificed everything else, no slow delivery, no large freight, to own that single word. Volvo owned safety. For decades, if you wanted the safest car for your family, Volvo was the default. Crest owned cavities. Mercedes owned engineering. BMW owned driving. The leader in any category always owns a word. Often it's the category name itself, like Coca-Cola owning cola. But if you're not the leader, you need to narrow your focus. Prego challenged the giant ragu in spaghetti sauce. They couldn't be the leader, so they chose one attribute, thicker. And it worked. This is the ultimate sacrifice. You have to give something up to get something. And once you've got your word, you have to protect it fiercely. You can't be all things to all people. You can't stand for safety one day and performance the next. The essence of marketing is narrowing the focus. You actually become stronger when you reduce what you're trying to do. This connects to the law of exclusivity. Two companies cannot own the same word in the prospect's mind. When Volvo owns safety, it's pointless for another car company to build their marketing around safety. All that does is reinforce Volvo's position. You're basically telling customers, safety is important, and oh, by the way, the company that means safety is Volvo. Burger King learned this lesson the hard way. Research showed that the most important attribute for fast food was, surprise, fast. So Burger King launched a massive campaign to position themselves as the fast choice. The problem? McDonald's already owned fast in everyone's mind. The campaign crashed and burned because they tried to attack the leader on their strongest point. This brings us to how the marketplace actually structures itself. Once these mental positions are established, a predictable pattern emerges. This is the law of the ladder. For each category, our minds create a product ladder with a brand name on each rung. In rental cars, Hertz is on top, Avis is second, National is third. Your strategy depends entirely on which rung you're standing on. For years, Avis advertised they had the finest rental cars. Nobody believed them. How could they be the finest if they weren't number one? Then they did something revolutionary. They acknowledged exactly where they stood. Their new campaign, Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, so why go with us? We try harder. It was genius. For 13 straight years, Avis had lost money. The year they admitted they were number 2, they started making money, lots of it. They succeeded, not because they actually tried harder, but because they positioned themselves relative to Hertz, the leader already, on top of the ladder in customers' minds. They embraced being the alternative to the leader. This reveals a fascinating pattern that plays out over time, captured in the law of duality. In the long run, every market becomes a two-horse race. Early on, a category might have lots of rungs on the ladder. But gradually, it consolidates into an epic battle between two major players, the established leader and the upstart challenger. In batteries, it's Duracell versus Energizer. In film, it was Kodak versus Fuji. In sneakers, it's Nike versus Reebok. In hamburgers, it's McDonald's versus Burger King. And of course, in cola, it's Coke versus Pepsi. Back in 1969, Coke outsold Pepsi by a huge margin, with Royal Crown Cola in a distant third place. The law of duality predicted this wasn't sustainable. The leader would lose share, number 2 would gain, squeezing out number 3. That's exactly what happened. Today, cola is a two-horse race, and Royal Crown is basically a footnote. In a mature industry, third place is an incredibly tough spot to be in. So if you're number 2, the challenger, what's your move? Enter the law of the opposite. If you're shooting for second place, your strategy is determined by the leader. Every strength has a weakness. You need to find the essence of what makes the leader strong and present people with the opposite. Don't try to be better, try to be different. Coca-Cola was the classic, the original, the established choice. It was what the older generation drank. Pepsi brilliantly turned that strength into a weakness. They positioned themselves as the choice of a new generation, the Pepsi generation. If old people drank Coke and young people drank Pepsi, there was no room left for anyone else. Scope mouthwash did the same thing to Listerine. Listerine was the powerful germ-killing mouthwash that tasted like medicine. Scope didn't try to be a better germ killer. They positioned themselves as the opposite, the good-tasting mouthwash. They hung the label, medicine breath, on their competitor, and it stuck. By presenting yourself as the alternative, you create a home for everyone who doesn't want to buy from the leader. But what happens when you're a successful company? The biggest danger comes from within. It's the irresistible temptation to violate the law of line extension. There's enormous pressure to extend your brand's success. This is, hands down, the most violated law in marketing. A company has a hit product, let's say A1 steak sauce. It dominates its market. The boardroom logic sounds so reasonable. People love A1. They trust our name. Now people are eating less beef and more chicken. So let's launch A1 poultry sauce. They'll know it's great because it has the A1 name. but it fails. Why? Because in customers' minds, A1 isn't a brand name. It's steak sauce. You don't ask for A1 brand sauce. You ask for the A1. The name has become the category. Slapping that name on chicken sauce just confuses people and dilutes the power of the original brand. More is less. The more products you attach to a brand name, the less that name means in consumers' minds. IBM used to mean mainframe computers. Today it stands for everything, which means it stands for nothing. Volkswagen built its success in America on the small, quirky, reliable Beetle. It owned the small car position. Then they decided to be like General Motors and sell bigger, faster, sportier cars, all under the Volkswagen name. People were confused. If a Volkswagen is a big, fast car, what does the name even mean anymore? The company lost its focus, and its market share collapsed. This leads directly to the law of sacrifice. You have to give up something to get something. This law is the exact opposite of line extension. If you want real success, you need to reduce your product line, not expand it. You need to sacrifice your target market. You need to sacrifice constant change. Pepsi-Cola sacrificed everyone except the youth market, and by doing that they captured the youth market and everyone who wanted to feel young. Marlboro cigarettes sacrificed the female market to focus exclusively on men, specifically the rugged cowboy. What happened? Marlboro became the #1 cigarette brand in the world, for both men and women. Your marketing target isn't always your actual market. You aim at a narrow target to create a powerful perception that appeals to a much broader audience. The temptation is always to cast a wider net, but the wider the net, the more holes it has. True power comes from focus. Over time, even that focus can seem threatened because categories themselves evolve. This is the law of division. Over time, a category will divide and become 2 or more categories. A category starts as one thing, like computers. Then it splits into mainframes, mini-computers, personal computers, laptops, and notebooks. Each new segment gets its own leader, which is rarely the leader of the original category. IBM led mainframes, but DEC led minis, and Apple led PCs. The smart leader, like General Motors in its heyday, addresses each new category with a new brand name: Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, Cadillac. The foolish leader tries to use the same name for everything. When Honda wanted to enter the luxury car market, they didn't call it the Honda Ultra. They created a completely new brand with new dealerships and a new identity, Acura. They understood the law of division. All of this points to a fundamental truth about timing, captured in the law of perspective. Marketing effects take place over an extended period of time. Many marketing moves look brilliant in the short term but turn disastrous long term. A sale, for instance, boosts business today, but in the long run, it teaches customers to never buy at regular price. It cheapens the brand. Line extension is the perfect example. When Miller introduced Miller Lite, it was brilliant. The first light beer, but they put the Miller name on it. Short term, sales for both Miller High Life and Miller Lite exploded, but long term, the brand became confused. What was a Miller? The blue collar, Miller Time beer, or the yuppie light beer? The confusion eroded everything, and over the next decade, Miller High Life went into terminal decline. Short-term gain, long-term pain. And this reveals the final, humbling set of laws, the ones that remind us we're not in complete control. The law of unpredictability tells us that unless you write your competitors' plans, you can't predict the future. Most marketing plans are based on assumptions about the future that usually turn out to be wrong. You can't plan the future, but you can spot trends. A fad is a wave in the ocean. Lots of hype, but it comes and goes quickly. A trend is the tide, almost invisible, but incredibly powerful over time. The law of acceleration says successful programs are built on trends, not fads. The law of hype reminds us that things are often the opposite of how they appear in the press. When a company is thriving, it doesn't need hype. When it needs hype, it's usually in trouble. Real revolutions don't arrive with marching bands and front-page stories. They sneak up on you. This leads to the law of success. Success often leads to arrogance, and arrogance to failure. When people become successful, they lose objectivity. They substitute their own judgment for what the market actually wants. They start believing their name is the reason for success, not the smart marketing moves they made. So they slap that name on everything, violating line extension and planting the seeds of their own downfall. And finally, there's the law of failure. Failure is to be expected and accepted. Too many companies try to fix things rather than drop things. A better strategy is recognizing failure early and cutting your losses. The Japanese consensus model makes this easier. It's easier to say, "We were wrong," than "I was wrong." Admitting a mistake is the first step toward finding a new path. And to get on any path at all, you need one last thing: the law of resources. Without adequate funding, an idea won't get off the ground. Even the best idea in the world won't go far without the money to get it into people's minds. An idea without money is almost worthless. You'll get further with a mediocre idea and $1 million than with a brilliant idea and no money. Money is the fuel that makes the marketing engine run. These 22 laws, taken together, form a complete framework. They aren't just tips or tactics, they're the governing principles of the mental marketplace. Whether we know them or not, they're always at work, shaping the fate of ideas, companies, and careers. To violate them is to court failure. To understand them is to hold a map for making a lasting impact. As we zoom out and look at these laws together, what's truly remarkable is how timeless they are. The book was written in the early 90s, a world before Google, before social media, before the idea that every person has a personal brand. Yet these principles feel more relevant today than ever. In our world overflowing with noise, where anyone can broadcast a message to millions, the law of focus isn't just corporate strategy anymore. It's a personal survival guide. The pressure to be everything to everyone, perfect career, perfect family, thriving social life, a dozen hobbies, is crushing. Ries and Trout's wisdom offers a powerful antidote. You become stronger when you narrow your scope. What's the one word you want to own in the minds of people who matter to you? Are you dependable, creative, innovative? You can't own all of them. Choosing, sacrificing, that's the first step toward building a powerful reputation. The law of perception has also taken on new dimensions. We live in an age of filtered realities and curated online personas. The line between objective reality and perception has never been blurrier. Understanding that the battle is won or lost in the mind, not in facts and figures, is crucial. It explains why a simple, emotional story can be more powerful than mountains of data. It teaches us to communicate not just what is true, but what feels true to our audience. But for me, the most profound and challenging law is the law of sacrifice. It runs completely counter to our culture of more features, more followers, more choices. The book's simple but powerful message: true success comes not from addition, but from subtraction. What are you willing to give up? What product line will you discontinue? What target market will you ignore? What part of your identity will you let go of to strengthen what remains? These aren't easy questions. They require courage. They require a willingness to go against conventional wisdom. So how can you start applying these ideas today? Let me offer a few thoughts. First, think about a project you're working on, a goal you have, or even your own personal brand. Ask yourself, in what category am I trying to be first? If you're not first, what new category can you create where you can be first? Are you just another student trying to get into college? Or are you the first student from your school to build a real app that solves a community problem? The shift in framing changes everything. Second, try to define yourself or your project with a single word. What's the one attribute you want to own in other people's minds? This is the law of focus in action. Write that word down. Put it somewhere you'll see it. Let it guide your decisions. If your word is simplicity, then every feature you add needs scrutiny. If your word is dependability, then every promise you make must be kept, without fail. Finally, embrace the law of candor. When you make a mistake, admit it. Acknowledge a weakness. It's disarming and builds trust faster than almost anything else. In a world full of people trying to project perfection, admitting a negative is a powerful way to earn a positive. I know my public speaking isn't the most polished, you might say, but I'm incredibly passionate about this topic. People will lean in, ready to hear what you have to say. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing is more than a book about business. It's a book about human psychology. It's about how ideas travel, how reputations are built, and how influence is earned. That was a summary of the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Ries and Jack Trout. We've explored the core principles today, but I'll be honest, a summary can only ever be a map. The real adventure happens when you explore the territory yourself. The true power of this book lies in the stories and subtle connections you'll only discover by reading it. This summary is designed to help you decide if this journey is worth your time. If understanding the invisible rules that shape our world resonates with you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning marketing, it's about learning a new way to see. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe. We're building a community of curious minds here, and I don't want you to miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.